She finally realized who you really are, and it terrified her. Have you ever felt the exact moment someone's perception of you shifted, even if they never admitted it? God says there was a silent turning point, no announcement, no confrontation, just a realization that struck her spirit like lightning in a clear sky. She finally saw you clearly, and when she recognized who you really are, it unsettled her in ways she cannot explain. There was a woman named Miriam. She was present in every room, but rarely the loudest voice. She listened more than she spoke. She gave more than she received. For years, one particular woman stayed close to her, smiling, supporting, nodding at her dreams. But beneath that closeness lived quiet comparison. Miriam carried something rare, calm authority, and because she never flaunted it, others misjudged it. One evening at a small gathering, something shifted. Miriam spoke, not dramatically, not forcefully, but with clarity and conviction. The room responded differently. Conversations slowed. Even the strongest personalities leaned in. It wasn't charm, it wasn't performance, it was presence. In that moment, her friend felt something unfamiliar rise inside her chest. Displacement. She realized Miriam was not merely surviving seasons, she was being prepared for position. God says this is what happened to you. She watched you endure things that would have made others loud and defensive. She saw doors close in your face, and yet you did not beg to re-enter. She noticed betrayal, and instead of becoming bitter, you became disciplined. You grew quieter but stronger, softer but sharper. And that evolution is what began to disturb her. Because when someone finally realizes that your restraint is discipline, your patience is strategy, your kindness is power under control, it shakes them. As it is written in James 4:10, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." God says she expected you to push your way forward. She thought you would compete. She assumed you would assert yourself aggressively to secure recognition. But instead, you humbled yourself before me, and I began lifting you in ways she could not comprehend. What terrified her was not your ambition, it was your favor. She sensed that your rise was not self-manufactured, it was ordained. And elevation that is ordained cannot be prevented. You thought you were simply choosing peace, but heaven calls it positioning. You believed you were stepping back, but spiritually you were being advanced. While others chased validation, you cultivated alignment. And alignment is heavier than popularity. She was comfortable when you doubted yourself. She felt safe when you minimized your gifts. She could shine easily when you were shrinking. But the day you stopped apologizing for your growth, the day you carried yourself with quiet certainty, something shifted in the atmosphere between you. God says you did not become arrogant, you became aware. Aware of your worth, aware of your calling, aware that you do not need permission to exist in fullness. And awareness threatens those who built their confidence around your insecurity. The fear she feels now is subtle. It hides behind politeness. It disguises itself as distance. It may even appear as indifference. But internally, she is replaying moments, reevaluating conversations, questioning whether she misjudged you. Because she now understands something she once ignored. You were never beneath her. You were simply growing silently. And silent growth is the most dangerous kind. You did not climb by manipulation. You did not ascend by diminishing others. You did not scheme your way into rooms. You endured pressure without collapsing. You survived isolation without losing identity. You were refined without becoming resentful. God says refinement, when revealed, unsettles the insecure. She sees the composure in your walk, the steadiness in your decisions, the absence of desperation, and she senses inevitability. That is what frightens her most. Not your success, but its inevitability. Because when heaven decides to lift someone, no human insecurity can reverse it. When I place my hand upon a life, subtle sabotage loses power, and she feels that shift. She feels that you are no longer operating from uncertainty. You are operating from assignment. And here is what she cannot undo. She knows now. She knows you are not ordinary. She knows you are not dependent. She knows you are not small. And once someone sees that truth, they cannot unsee it. God says, brace yourself, because what she realized privately is about to become visible publicly. The same rooms that once overlooked you will begin to acknowledge you. The same voices that doubted you will grow quieter. And her internal fear will soon surface in unexpected ways. Watch carefully, because her next move will reveal whether she can celebrate your elevation or whether her terror will expose her heart completely. Do you know what unsettles a person the most? It is not your success. It is not your beauty. It is not even your influence. It is the moment they realize they can no longer define you. God says when she understood that you had stepped beyond her interpretation, beyond her quiet labels, beyond her silent assumptions, something inside her lost control. She had a version of you stored in her mind, manageable, predictable, dependent. That version made her comfortable. That version made her feel slightly superior. But the day you stopped reacting the way she expected, the day you stopped explaining yourself, the day you no longer sought reassurance from her tone, that was the day her internal narrative collapsed. God says you did not announce your growth, you embodied it. You began making decisions without consulting opinions that once influenced you. You stopped volunteering your vulnerabilities to someone who never handled them gently. You smiled, but it was different. Not approval-seeking, not anxious. Grounded, certain, whole. And she noticed. You see, insecurity is extremely perceptive when control begins slipping. She felt the shift before she understood it. Conversations became shorter. Your energy felt unavailable. Not hostile, just unavailable. And when someone realizes they no longer have emotional access to you, they panic quietly. God says she tried to test it. She withdrew slightly to see if you would chase. You didn't. She delayed responses to see if you would double text. You didn't. She offered subtle criticism to see if you would shrink again. You didn't. Instead, you remained steady, calm, unbothered. And that steadiness echoed louder than confrontation ever could. Because now she sees that your validation does not come from proximity. It comes from purpose. There is a difference. God says what terrifies her is not that you changed. It is that you evolved beyond her influence. She once felt like a reference point in your life. Now she feels peripheral. And when someone realizes they are no longer central to your confidence, their ego begins to tremble. You must understand something. People are comfortable with your potential. They are not comfortable with your power. Potential feels distant. Power feels present. When you were becoming, she felt safe. But now that you are arriving, she feels displaced. And here is the truth she cannot escape. You are not rising because she stepped aside. You are rising because I lifted you. God says there were nights she assumed you were breaking, but you were building. There were seasons she believed you were isolated, but you were being instructed. There were moments she thought you were overlooked, but you were being positioned. While she was measuring you socially, I was measuring you spiritually. And spiritual promotion does not require human permission. This is what she sensed the night she lay awake thinking about you. Yes, she thinks about you more than you know. Not out of admiration, not fully out of resentment, but out of confusion. She cannot reconcile how someone she thought she understood now feels unfamiliar. You carry yourself differently. You speak with fewer disclaimers. You do not over-explain. You do not over-apologize. You do not overextend. God says you have learned the power of containment, and containment is threatening to those who once benefited from your overextension. She misses the version of you that needed her reassurance. She misses the version that asked for advice you did not truly require. She misses the dynamic where she felt ahead. But heaven never intended you to remain small for someone else's comfort. You were not created to orbit another person's insecurity. You were created to stand. And now you stand without trembling. That is what terrifies her. Because fear grows when comparison fails. She tries to measure herself against you, but your confidence is no longer competitive. It is anchored. She cannot compete with alignment. She cannot outperform calling. She cannot manipulate favor. God says the shift you feel in her energy is real. It is the sound of recalibration. She is trying to decide how to reposition herself in your life now that she sees you clearly. Will she celebrate you genuinely? Will she distance herself quietly? Or will she attempt subtle resistance? Watch carefully, because when someone realizes who you truly are, they must choose how to respond to it. And not everyone chooses maturity. You do not need to confront her. You do not need to expose her. You do not need to prove anything. Your transformation is speaking loudly enough. But understand this, recognition changes dynamics permanently. She can no longer treat you casually. She can no longer speak to you dismissively. She can no longer assume access to your time and emotional energy. You are no longer available in the way you once were. And that withdrawal of access is what she feels most. God says you have stepped into a dimension of self-respect that demands different treatment. And those who cannot adjust will reveal themselves through discomfort. The question is not whether she is afraid. The question is what fear will make her do next. Because realization is only the beginning. Reaction is coming. And what she chooses to do with the truth about you will either expose her insecurity or expose her heart completely. There is something she did not expect, and this is where her fear deepened. God says she thought realization would give her clarity. Instead, it gave her anxiety. Because once someone understands they misjudged you, they are forced to confront their own behavior. And self-confrontation is uncomfortable for those who preferred control over character. You must see this clearly. When she finally understood that you are not simply strong, but divinely protected, not merely talented, but appointed, not just resilient, but anointed for elevation, a new thought entered her mind. What if I mishandled someone heaven is lifting? That thought alone is heavy, because now it is no longer about comparison, it is about consequence. God says she replayed moments where she dismissed you, times she subtly undermined you, conversations where she planted doubt, not always loudly, not always aggressively, but strategically. And she is beginning to recognize something that unsettles her spirit. None of it worked. You did not collapse. You did not become smaller. You did not remain confused. Instead, you sharpened. That is what terrifies her most. She sees that pressure refined you, distance clarified you, opposition strengthened you. And now she realizes she may have unintentionally participated in your preparation. Understand this deeply. Some people think they are delaying you, when in reality they are developing you. God says she assumed her influence shaped your path, but she now senses that your path was never in her hands. It was in mine. And when someone recognizes that they were never the author of your progress, their illusion of power breaks. You see, she believed she could predict you. She believed she could adjust her behavior and trigger your insecurity. She believed she understood your emotional patterns. But you broke the pattern. You stopped reacting on cue. You stopped seeking her validation. You stopped fearing her distance. And when manipulation loses its effect, insecurity becomes exposed. God says her terror is not dramatic. It is internal, quiet, but persistent. She watches you now more carefully than before, not to celebrate, but to assess. She is trying to determine just how far you are going to rise, because elevation is no longer theoretical. It is visible. The confidence in your posture, the restraint in your responses, the discernment in your silence. These are not temporary phases. They are transformation. and transformation forces everyone around you to adjust. Some will adjust with humility, others will adjust with resistance. Here is the part she cannot escape. Your peace is authentic. It is not performative. It is not forced. It is not fragile. God says she expected cracks under pressure. Instead, she sees composure. She expected emotional reactions. Instead, she sees emotional intelligence. She expected you to break alignment when provoked. Instead, you remain centered. And now she understands something irreversible. You are no longer operating at the level where she first met you. You have ascended internally, and internal ascension is more powerful than external status. Because when your identity upgrades, your tolerance shifts, your boundaries solidify, your discernment sharpens. She feels it. She feels that you are not as accessible, not as impressionable, not as easily influenced. And for someone who once felt slightly ahead of you, that shift feels destabilizing. God says the terror is not hatred, it is displacement. She is trying to understand where she stands now that you stand taller. And deep down, she knows she must either grow or step aside, because you will not shrink to restore comfort. Let this settle in your spirit. Your growth is revealing her maturity level, and that revelation is unavoidable. She may attempt subtle kindness now, slight compliments, warmer tone, more supportive language, but beneath it is recalculation. She is trying to reposition herself in a dynamic that has changed permanently, because she finally sees that you are not competition, you are consequence. Consequence of prayer, consequence of refinement, consequence of obedience. God says you did not arrive here accidentally. Every tear you cried in silence built endurance. Every rejection redirected you strategically. Every lonely season anchored you deeper in me. And now when she looks at you, she does not just see growth. She sees inevitability. And inevitability creates urgency. The urgency to either align with you genuinely or distance before exposure happens. Watch carefully now, because realization has matured into awareness. Awareness is about to mature into action, and the action she takes next will confirm whether her fear turns into respect or resistance. There is a moment in every elevation where the tension becomes visible. God says you are approaching that moment now. She can no longer pretend she does not see it. The shift is too clear. The authority is too settled. The favor is too consistent. What once felt like potential now feels like momentum. And momentum makes people nervous when they realize they are no longer keeping pace. You may have sensed a subtle change in her tone, a slight tightness in her smile, a pause before she responds to good news about you. This is not imagination. This is internal conflict surfacing, because now she understands something she cannot reverse. You are being established, not temporarily noticed, not briefly celebrated, established. God says there is a difference between someone who shines occasionally and someone who carries light permanently. You are no longer flickering, you are steady, and steady light exposes insecurity. This is where Scripture becomes living proof. Remember Joseph in the book of Genesis. When he was young, he carried a dream from me, a glimpse of authority and elevation. His brothers saw the dream and were threatened, not because it had happened yet, but because they sensed its inevitability. They tried to contain him. They mocked him. They sold him. They believed distance would dissolve destiny. But hear this clearly. As it is written in Genesis 50:20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph's brothers realized too late who he truly was. The same one they dismissed became the one positioned above them. The same dream they resented became the very structure that preserved them. And when they stood before him in Egypt, recognition struck them with fear. God says this is not about revenge, it is about realization. She is beginning to understand that what she once underestimated was divinely authored. Just as Joseph's coat symbolized favor before the palace ever appeared, your refinement symbolized promotion long before visibility arrived. You were marked before you were manifested. And when someone recognizes they mishandled a marked individual, it unsettles them deeply. Notice something powerful about Joseph's story. The betrayal did not cancel the calling. The delay did not destroy the dream. The pit did not prevent the palace. Instead, every attempt to minimize him became a stepping stone toward establishment. God says the same pattern is unfolding in your life. Moments she thought would slow you strengthened you. Silence she assumed would shrink you clarified you. Distance she created refined your independence. And now she sees that nothing she did altered your trajectory. If anything, it accelerated it. This realization is heavy because it forces her to confront the truth. She was never competing with you. She was witnessing prophecy in motion. And prophecy does not consult insecurity before fulfillment. You must understand the weight of this. When Joseph's brothers finally stood before him, the fear they felt was not because he was cruel, it was because he was elevated. Authority changes perception instantly. The same voice that was once ignored now carries command. The same presence that was once tolerated now carries influence. God says elevation rearranges dynamics permanently. She senses that rearrangement happening now. You speak and people listen differently. You move and doors open naturally. You withdraw and your absence is felt. That is establishment. And establishment terrifies those who preferred you uncertain. But hear me carefully. Your story is not meant to create fear. It is meant to reveal alignment. Joseph did not use his position to humiliate. He used it to fulfill purpose. And you must carry the same spirit. Because your elevation is not about proving her wrong, it is about proving my faithfulness. The reason this scripture aligns so naturally is because it reveals a divine pattern. Those who misjudge the called often realize it only after elevation becomes undeniable. She is beginning to see that the very traits she once overlooked, your integrity, your restraint, your humility, were the evidence of divine preparation. And now, as momentum builds around you, she stands at a crossroads internally. Will she humble herself and grow? Or will she allow comparison to harden into resistance? Joseph's brothers had to bow before what they once mocked, not because Joseph demanded it, but because destiny demanded alignment. God says you are stepping into a season where alignment will become necessary around you. People will either adjust to your growth or expose their discomfort. And her next decision will not be subtle. It will reveal everything. Because when destiny becomes visible, neutrality disappears. Watch closely. The same realization that terrified her is about to test her character in ways she did not anticipate. Now listen carefully. This was never just about her fear. It was about your awakening. God says from the very beginning, I allowed the misunderstanding. I allowed the underestimation. I allowed the subtle comparison, not to harm you, but to reveal you. Because there are certain dimensions of strength that only surface when someone misjudges you. If she had recognized your value too early, you might have depended on her validation. If she had celebrated you too loudly, you might have confused applause with assignment. If she had understood you immediately, you might not have sought me as deeply. But I needed you anchored in me, not in approval. So I let the misunderstanding stretch you. I let the distance mature you. I let the subtle resistance refine you. And now you stand different. Not louder, deeper. Not arrogant, aware. Not defensive, established. God says this is the true revelation. She finally realized who you are, but you finally realized it first. That is why her fear cannot destabilize you. Because your identity is no longer fragile. You do not need her to confess it. You do not need her to validate it. You do not need her to apologize to confirm it. You know who you are. And when a person knows who they are in me, the atmosphere around them shifts automatically. From the beginning of this journey, you have felt something changing internally. Conversations that once drained you now feel unnecessary. Dynamics that once confused you now appear obvious. You are discerning faster, moving wiser, speaking less but meaning more. This is maturity, and maturity always restructures relationships. God says, do not resent her realization. Do not gloat over her discomfort. Do not shrink to ease her fear. Simply remain aligned. Because what truly terrifies insecurity is consistency. Continue being grounded. Continue being disciplined. Continue being humble. Continue being faithful. Let your life preach louder than your mouth ever could. Remember Joseph, not in bitterness, but in clarity. He did not chase his brothers for acknowledgement. He did not force recognition. Elevation spoke for him. Time spoke for him. Fruit spoke for him. The same will happen for you. There will be rooms where your presence carries weight without explanation. There will be conversations where your silence commands more respect than someone else's noise. There will be opportunities that open without you forcing them, and she will see it. Not because you broadcast it, but because establishment cannot hide. Here is your motivation tonight. You were never behind. You were being built. Every tear that felt unseen was recorded. Every rejection that felt unfair was redirected. Every lonely moment that felt confusing was constructing resilience inside you. You were not delayed. You were designed. God says your growth is proof that quiet obedience outruns loud competition. Your steadiness is proof that humility carries power. Your elevation is proof that I promote differently than the world does. So stand firm now. Stand without apology. Stand without explanation. Stand without fear. If she chooses to grow alongside you, welcome maturity. If she chooses to distance herself, release gracefully. If she chooses resistance, remain unshaken. Because none of those responses alter your assignment. The revelation of who you are was never meant to intimidate others. It was meant to position you. And positioning is preparation for impact. This is not the end of the story. It is the confirmation of it. The same God who sustained you in misunderstanding will sustain you in visibility. The same grace that carried you through isolation will carry you through influence. The same discipline that built you privately will stabilize you publicly. Do not step backward now. You have outgrown doubt. You have outgrown comparison. You have outgrown the need to be chosen by people who were never assigned to define you. Lift your head. Breathe deeper. Walk forward. Because the one who finally realized who you are is not your judge. She is a witness to transformation, a witness to resilience, a witness to divine elevation. And as you move into this next season, understand this clearly. Fear may recognize you first, but respect will follow. Stay consistent, stay aligned, stay humble. The same light that unsettled her will illuminate your path even brighter. And what once terrified her will soon inspire many.